attendees will come in.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming. Right now, participants, you are coming into the room, and so we will give it a few minutes for you to arrive. This is the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. So thank you very much for being here. Please use our Q&A function for questions. We definitely want to hear what you would like to know more about or what you would like our panelists to speak on. So please do go ahead and place your questions into the Q&A. It can be anonymous questions or with your name. Welcome. Thank you for coming into the room. We are going to give a few minutes for others to arrive. Yes, we see here that people are logging in. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. This is the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. The Q&A function is available for your questions, your comments. Please place in there what you would like to know more about. We will give a few minutes for others to arrive. I see here that you're logging on. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you. And after today's webinar, please feel free to communicate with us through our email, Friends Center for Children. That email address is info@friendscenterforchildren.org and our website, friendscenterforchildren.org. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. People are still coming in. Welcome. This is the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. Thank you for being here. Please use our Q&A function for questions. I already see questions in the Q&A. Thank you very much for sending them. You can ask with your name or you can ask anonymously. Right now, we're giving a few minutes for others to arrive. We see here that people are logging on. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. We are happy to be here. We are happy that you are joining us. Please use our Q&A function for questions. And I will do my best to moderate the questions. We already have questions in there. You may ask anonymously. You may ask with your name. We will give a few minutes for others to arrive. I see here that more people are logging on. Thank you very much for being here today. After today's webinar, please feel free to communicate with us through our Friends Center for Children email address, info@friendscenterforchildren.org, and our website, friendscenterforchildren.org. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. More are coming into the room. We will start in just a moment. Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here today. We are going to start. Welcome to the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. Uh, this is the first of multiple conversations about the pearls and progress of the early care and education industry. And we're calling it the Friends Center for Children Let's Talk series. As a participant of this webinar, you will be invited to our next Let's Talk webinar in October. I am Orlando Yarbrough III, and I have the honor of chairing the board for Friends Center for Children. And I'm honored to co-host today's important conversation. I joined the board 6 years ago, and I was on the board for 2 years, and there was such a connection between what the school said it valued and its work to live out those values. I'm not talking about perfection, but I'm talking about lining up intent with action that I enrolled. I was fortunate to be able to enroll our daughter, Hannah, into Friends Center for Children. And so I've been a parent there as well. And Hannah has since graduated. Friends Center, is now in the first grade. But I'm very honored to be a part of this organization. I would like to introduce to you Alex. Alex is our executive director of Friends Center. Alex has 30 plus years experience in early childhood development and elementary education as a teacher and an administrator in Connecticut and New York. She holds dual master's degrees from Bank Street College of Education in early child development and elementary education, and a bachelor's degree from Union College. She is a third generation New Haven native and longtime resident of Fairhaven. Alice has served as a program coordinator for New Haven-based Area Cooperative Education Services, ACES, early childhood classroom observer for Southern Connecticut State University, and budget coordinator for the New Haven Board of Education, facilitating a $2 million grant. Alex has taught in New York City, New Haven, and Greenwich, and several elementary schools and preschool settings, directed summer camps and written and supervised curriculums at elementary, middle, and high school levels with an emphasis on literacy, math, science, and multiple disciplinary studies. Alex is a founder of the New Haven Children's Ideal Learning District, New Haven Child. New Haven Child is a coalition of local and national early childhood proponents that have come together to create a place-based pilot program in New Haven. New Haven Child proposes to revolutionize the early care and education landscape by bringing the community together around a common vision of ideal learning with a focus on equity. The goal of New Haven Child is to provide high quality early care and education experiences for all 15,000 New Haven children ages 0 to 8. She currently serves as an advisory member of the University of New Haven's nonprofit certificate in leadership, innovation, and organizational stability, and on the Merrill-appointed New Haven Early Childhood Council. She is a 2019 recipient of the Southern Black Nurses Association Community Service Award and the 2019 Amity Club Distinguished Italian American Lifetime Achievement Award. She is also Exchange Magazine's Master Leader Award and the recipient of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence Marvin Moore Spotlight Award. She is a member of the National Association for the Education of Young Children and is a former board member for Connecticut Voices for Children, appointee to the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission on Reading, and leader of the William Casper Graustein Memorial Fund Community Leadership Program. She is the mother of 2 fantastic teenage children. I've met them, they are fantastic, and has a lovely black dog named Blue, spelled as you would expect. And what I love about Alex is her ability to evolve leadership in response to insights and new information. If I ever worked closely with an adaptive leader, it has been Alex and her team. As for one, over this pandemic, I've seen a flexibility in implementation along with a consistency in values-based decisions and actions. Welcome and thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Orlando. That felt really uncomfortable and way too long.
Good, I did right then. Thank you.
I have the pleasure of now getting to introduce Rosa. And I have been lucky enough to introduce Rosa at a few events, but my all-time favorite was actually a time when Rosa wasn't present. No offense, Rosa, but it was the Connecticut Voices for Children annual award dinner. And Myra Jones Taylor was receiving the award for her amazing work on starting the Office of Early Childhood. And Rosa was unable to attend because she was in session. And she offered a wonderful letter in support of Myra. So I got to read the letter, and to make it more interesting, I decided to do it as Rosa. So it was quite fun. I used a lot of hand gestures. I got to lean into the crowd. At one point, I ripped my glasses off and I made statements like, "We are not doing enough for our babies." But for today's introduction, I thought I would sort of stick to the facts. So in 1990, Rosa DeLauro was elected to the House of Representatives, and she has served as the Congresswoman for Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District ever since, which is my district, and I couldn't be more proud. She is the chair of the House Appropriations Committee and sits on the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. She's the chair of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Appropriations Subcommittee, where she oversees our nation's investments in education, health, and employment. She is a member of 62 House caucus groups and is the co-chair of the Long Island Sound Caucus, the Food Safety Caucus, and my personal favorite, the Baby Caucus. At the core of Rosa's work is fighting for families, working families for children, and to strengthen the economy. She has worked to raise the nation's minimum wage, give all employees access to paid sick time, allow employees to take paid and family medical leave, to ensure equal pay for equal work. She's determined to increase support for education and to make college more affordable. She's fighting to protect the Affordable Care Act so that all Americans have access to affordable care. She supports tax cuts for working and middle-class families. She's expanding the child tax credit and introduced the young child tax credit to give families with young children an economic lift. These are just some of many other accomplishments. And while all this is remarkable, Rosa, you know this, I hope, what I love most about you is your constant and steady effort to improve the lives of children and families. You have been unwavering and relentless in your effort to move social and political will towards what is best for young children. And after 31 years of hard work, we are seeing groundbreaking shifts. We are thrilled to welcome you here today and talk about this work. So whenever you're ready, we'll jump right in.
I'm so delighted and honored to be with you. And I just say, Dr. Yarborough, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for your great work as chairman of the board. And with regard to Alex, I say this in all honesty, I feel like I am in the presence of childcare and early childhood education royalty. There has been no one who has fought harder or who has been so steadfast and right on point with regard to what our children need, how we need to take care of them, what is the environment that they need to grow up in, and as a fierce advocate for kids. And I have learned so much from Alex, and I treasure. I think I've known her since she's young now, but I knew her when she was even younger. So I've watched with great pride someone who has taken charge and taken charge. You speak about years of effort. One of the things that is so critically important is that Shirley Chisholm once said about how you implement ideas when she was asked by the press. And she said, you don't stand on the sidelines, you don't complain, and you don't whimper. You just move forward. And Alex, that's what you have done with regard to our children. You move forward, you move them forward and their families. And I love you. So delighted to be with you.
Thank you so much. Well, no one has moved children and families forward more than you. So that's what people really want to hear about. So thank you for that. That is lovely. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and get to a question that we've been really wanting to hear your thoughts on. So we believe at Friend Center that, the most critical time of human development is early childhood. We know scientific awareness points to that. 90% of a child's brain develops by age 5. So a newborn has all those brain cells they need for the rest of their life. And what makes the brain work are the connections between those cells. So early childhood education teachers and ideal learning programs know how to foster those connections. And by ideal learning, I'm talking about programs that meet children and families' needs within a framework of equity to ensure and expand developmental whole child learning for all children, regardless of race, income, place, whatever it may be. So all children. And it's clear you think that's important too. And one of my questions for you was, can you tell us a little bit about why children and families are so important to you, and take us back really to the beginning of your interest
Sure.
in
No,
that field?
thank you for the question. As I think about, myself, I grew up in a family in New Haven, born and raised in the city of New Haven, of an immigrant family, and a family that struggled financially, really for all of their lives. And both my parents worked. My mom worked in the old sweatshops in the city of New Haven. And when I think about it, they had, what would they do with me? So, now we look at daycare, we look at preschool, we look at all of these efforts, none of that available. So it was my grandmother's pastry store was, my childcare with my grandmother, my aunts, etc., who took care of me. My dad would often take me with him to work, and he worked in a package store, and the owner would sleep in the back, so I had to be very, very quiet. I can remember that. But my point is that there was, but at the earliest possible time, at a great financial struggle, my parents put me in, it was a school in New Haven, and I really ought to go back and take a look at the history. It's called Miss Gaylor's, which was an effort, one of the only, or a preschool, if you will, so that they had someplace to put me. They struggled to do that. In the meantime, it was family-centered childcare, but it was that education. I don't say that is the genesis of my interest, but I have to reflect on what the circumstances were, for my own family, but also in terms of my professional experiences. And I have to credit Senator Dodd. When I worked as his chief of staff for 8 years, and worked, managed his political campaigns, both in 80 and in 86, but he focused in before anyone else was focused on what was happening to children and families, and what could we do in order to create and deal with legislation that would address this balance between work and family and children-centered. He established the first children's caucus in the United States Senate. He participated in that when he was in the House of Representatives. And out of that, I worked very closely with him together as we developed early childhood education legislation, daycare. And so it was a profound effect on me, and what I saw as the need and the necessity for families and what they were struggling with. And as I recalled, what my own family struggled with for so many years in terms of trying to provide me with an educational environment and so forth. So that is the genesis of where this has taken me over the years. And it's a passion. It really is a passion. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say that passion stems from lived experiences as well as the knowledge that you gained, which I think is true for a lot of us, right? So one of the things that it seems though your journey led you to is really this incredibly impactful movement that you created that we're in right now, which is the child tax credit. And in our opinion, there's really nothing more impactful than child poverty that's happened right now than this tax credit initiative. And I'm wondering if you can tell us in everyday language about the child tax credit.
Sure. Well, I think it's extraordinary. Let me just put a cap on it. It's Social Security for children. Now, Franklin Roosevelt signed, and I might add, it was Francis Perkins, the first Secretary of Labor, who was the driving force for Social Security in the nation. But it lifted 90% of seniors out of poverty. And I had the opportunity to say this to President Biden when I was in his office early in January of this year. And he was under the portrait of Franklin Roosevelt. And I said, Mr. President, we have an opportunity. You have an opportunity with the stroke of a pen to lift over 55% of kids out of poverty. It's an immediate method for reducing child poverty in our country. And we are already seeing the benefits. It's really impactful that today is the 15th, and today is the third month. The 15th of every month is when the check goes out to families. And already what we've seen is the result. The tangible results, as we are seeing poverty rate drop, we're seeing hunger drop, and there are statistics here. And essentially what it does, the child tax credit being expanded and improved, it is $300 a month per child for children who are 6 and under, and from 6 to 17, it is $250 per month per child.
Wow.
And we made it available on a monthly basis. We often don't congratulate the IRS, but the IRS worked it out so that families can receive the check. And what is it for? You know, when you think about it, it's about diapers, it's about food, it's about potentially paying the month's rent. There's a story in the New Republic this week about, you know, families who could never provide the opportunity for an extracurricular activity for their kid, you know, and being able to do that. We are providing, it is a lifeline for the middle class, a struggling middle class, for working families, and for the vulnerable. And one of its real strengths, Alex and Dr. Yarbrough, is that it is what I could say universal. 90% of our children receive the same amount of money. So it doesn't pit one group, you know, against another. And I just will say this one, the results so far, what Columbia University has said, or the National Academies of Science, when they did their report, they said that the child tax credit would be the single biggest issue to lift kids out of poverty in this country. And now what they have also said is that we are, for every $8 you spend on a child, you get, for every dollar you spend, you get $8 in return. So that this is cost saving. It costs us $1 trillion a year. This is an IRS or a Columbia data point. $1 trillion every year is the cost of child poverty in the United States. So simply, it is reducing poverty everywhere. African-American kids, 50%, white children, 48%, Native American kids, almost 70%. So it is extraordinary, and that is simply what it is, and it's working.
It's amazing. It's an amazing accomplishment. I have a million follow-up questions.
I just one more point
Go ahead.
I want to make, because in the prior, which is important, there was a child tax credit in place, but 1/3 of kids were left out. Why? Because it said that you had to make $3,000 and above. It first started at $11,000 and above in order to have the child tax credit be accessible. Madness. And then Speaker Pelosi, in her negotiations a number of years ago, we've been joined at the hip on this issue. It went down to $3,000. But what we were doing was we were leaving out the poorest kids, the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And now children with parents whose income is so low that they do not file taxes, who were previously excluded, are now the recipients of the child tax cut.
Wow, it's amazing. So, as I said, a million questions, but I think I would be remiss to not go back to the beginning of your story when you, I can imagine that sort of moving this legislation and getting to where you are now took a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of lobbying, a lot of relationship building. And you mentioned in your story being able to really sit and have that direct conversation with President Biden. So I'm wondering if you could share first what his response was, if that's possible, but also just the background of how you got from 30 years ago to this moment, and what were some of the defining moments in that journey, like profound accomplishments and disappointments, because I can imagine that there were times where you brought that same conversation up and it did not move forward. So just curious about that journey a little bit.
Sure. No, and I would make one more point, because you asked, and you talk about early childhood experiences. I can recall at about age 9 or 10 years old, when we went home on a Friday night, and we found all of our furniture out on the street in New Haven, because my folks had been evicted, not because they were not working hard. It was a difficult time. So we went to live with my grandmother. And when you think about it, what would a child allowance meant to a family, at that juncture? But for me, the journey started, Alex, in 2003. I was sat on the budget committee at that time, and a wonderful human being, John Spratt of South Carolina, was the chair. And I said, John, what I would very much like to do is introduce an amendment. We were in the minority. The Democrats were in the minority. I said, John, I would very much like to introduce an amendment on the child tax credit of increasing the credit to $1,000 per child, starting immediately, making it fully refundable so that low-income families without filing taxes could take advantage of it. Available to all families, et cetera. And to pay for it, we would, reduce other tax cuts, et cetera. John Spratt said, go for it, go do it. So I introduced the amendment. I knew it was going to be defeated. It was defeated on a party line vote because we were in the minority. So, but we started the conversation. And it allowed me then over the years to try to promote a child tax credit. So since then, in each of the last 10 Congresses, I have introduced legislation to expand the child tax credit because of the additional payments that it would provide for, as I said, for childcare, for healthcare, clothing, whatever it was. And interestingly enough, I don't sit on this. This is a program that comes out of the Ways and Means Committee. And I don't sit on the Ways and Means Committee, but I wound up being the only person, not the only person, that's not because there are others, but I became the tip of the spear in promoting it. As I said, Speaker Pelosi was there. I could go to people like Charlie Rangel and Sandy Levin. Sometimes they saw me coming and they would say, I know, the child tax credit. Just a brief aside, when it did pass in the American Rescue Plan, I say this with a lot of emotion, I got a call from Charlie Rangel, Congressman Rangel, and he said to me, Rosa, he said, you did it. He said, finally, there's a child tax credit. And, so it was, you don't give up. You don't give up, and you don't stand on the sidelines, as Shirley Chisholm said. So I continued at it. We were never able, keeping in mind, we were in the minority for a very long time in the House. We could never get, and I would just say this, because it wasn't a question of serious opposition to a child tax credit, but it was an indifference. Right. And an indifference to children and what they would need. As I said, Social Security, who would ever deny the value of Social Security? But there was this indifference. So in the promotion of that, And I was always told, well, look, hey, we've got to get to a majority. We've got to have the presidency. We've got to have, that's what needs to happen to move this forward. So I took my opportunity when President Biden was a candidate. And again, I pitched the idea of the child tax credit to his folks. And when he sewed up the nomination, redoubled the efforts to lobby and his advisors. And the child tax credit became a part of the Biden tax plan in the campaign. It was exactly what myself and Susan Del Bene, my colleague from Washington State, in the American Family Act, that was put into the Biden tax plan. And also, I might say, because I have my Senate colleagues, Senator Sherrod Brown, Cory Booker, Michael Bennet, we've now, and then we got Richie Torres now from New York. So we're known as the CTC 6, but we went to his advisors. I did, and again, I called on, my brother, Senator Dodd, to reach out, close relationships with the Biden team, and enlisted his help, etc. So fast forward, President is elected. There's the discussions around the American Rescue Plan and what we're going to do. It was a weekend, and I get word that in the first draft of the American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit is not in it. Well, so I started on a Saturday, and I did what, my background is campaigns,
right?
And organizing campaigns. So I went into full campaign mode.
Right.
I phone banked the White House. I called Ron Klain, the chief of staff. I called Steve Ricchetti, the senior policy advisor, Brian Deese, Jared Bernstein, the National Economic Council, Susan Rice, Jeff, everyone that, was within that circle of folks. And what I said was, look, I have been being told, I guess one step back, there was a turning point, because when we did the American Heroes Bill in December, and the speaker got put in, the American Family Act was there, except we didn't have the Senate. So it came out. We weren't able to get it, but it was a turning point, because again, people were saying to me that, Rosa, we need to have the president in place. We need the House. Is that okay? Then when it was not in this first package, when I picked up the phone, I said, hello, you've been telling me,
right,
we need the president. We need majorities in the House and the Senate. It's now. It is now. And I must say, I had willing partners, because within the next 48 hours, they called and they said, it is in the package. And it was, you look at your career and you think of the moments that, but what captures for me, and when I say about you and what you do, is what you can do, what you and your organization can accomplish. And for me, it's the same thing. It's what the strength of the Congress can do, how it can change people's lives. And that's the power of the institution. It's its potential. It doesn't always exercise it, but it is the potential. And this, for me, is just the most glorious moment that we have this opportunity to make a difference. And that's why I'm fighting like you know what, to make it permanent.
We're counting on that.
Gotta try to do that.
Rosa, the questions are coming in. And one question here from Greg Melville, just to continue on what you're speaking about, Rosa, is there growing consensus, including Republicans in Congress, about the importance of early childhood education and support of women in the workplace as well?
I would just say that that is, I want to be frank, but I don't want to make this political. There is some understanding, but little manifestation of it in a strong and a positive way. Because look, I will just say this, as I said, we've had in the past, historically, there were Republicans and Democrats who supported a child tax credit. Newt Gingrich at one point had talked about a $500 child tax credit, but then he pulled back. Mitt Romney has a program. There are others, but it is they take money from Social Security to do it. It is not robust. So there is a glimmer, but for the most part, there is not a full-throated, affirmative view that this is critical for changing the nature of poverty in our country. But I'm always and ever, you continue to make the case. That's all. And that's why I want to get it into law in a permanent way, because I do not want to see it rolled back.
Yeah.
I do not want to see it rolled back.
So Rosa, thanks, Orlando. One thing you mentioned in a word that you used, and I want to try to switch gears a little and hyper focus on early childhood, because that's my agenda.
Right.
I'm going to be really upfront about it.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the word indifference. And as someone who's been doing this work for a long time, and, I think indifference is actually one of the worst responses that you can get.
Yes.
It's humiliating and sort of dehumanizing, and marginalizes really quickly the work and the effort. What I see in terms of a lot of the work that you've done is bringing, I think the work that you've done brings early care and education to the forefront of the American consciousness in a way that hasn't been. And I think COVID has done that too. So unfortunately, a byproduct of the pandemic has been this new consciousness. And we seem to be very precariously teetering on the edge of moving the nation forward to actually seeing the relationship between high quality early care and education and the benefits for children, families, and the economy. And I think that economy piece is what's finally shifting a little bit due to COVID, which is frustrating, right? I mean, imagine doing this your whole life, and it takes a pandemic for people to feel passionate about early care and education. So can you explain your perspective on what is happening within the early care and education industry, really at this moment in US history? What does it mean for children and families, and what are the large scale implications from your point of view, your vantage point?
Sure. No, I think when you make reference to the to COVID, I think, and people say we have to get back to normal. There is no normal to go back to. I think that this is what is definitive for all of us, and that is that when you look at both, and you're talking about childcare, and about
that's Stanley in there,
the industry almost collapsing. So that's a piece of it, and we're working to restore that effort, including in this reconciliation package that we're putting together. But in terms of, there is a greater understanding and emphasis on early childhood education, and there is beginning to be viewed, and that we have so many studies. It's not
so many.
My God, it's almost criminal that we have not acted on these studies in the past. So that's where we can make the investments. And there is a very serious interest in making those investments. And that's why I'm particularly pleased that we have to chair the Appropriations Committee.
Yeah.
Because within that Labor, Health and Human Service and Education subcommittee, which is where early childhood resides, we could do the increased funding. We did $5.2 billion in 2018, which was almost $2.5 billion increase from the prior year. In 2019, 5.2 billion, 20, 5.8, and 5.9 in 20. 2021 and 7.4 in the bill that will be coming out. So we have been steadily increasing the opportunity for funding so that we can really focus in. That's why the moment is now, so that if we can, we need all of the advocacy now in really pushing the edge of the envelope.
Yeah.
Because there is, the window in Washington shuts very quickly.
Yeah.
And while we can't let the moment pass to get this done, but there is a real recognition of the value of early childhood education. And with that, I might add that we pay people the wages that they need,
Yes.
who are the teachers, and understanding how we have to really buttress that system. So that is really heartening in so many ways.
Yeah, Arlinda, I just want to pause. I don't know if there's any, I'll jump in anytime you have a question that's sort of not coming up, but
Yes.
Rosa, you'd say the moment is now, which we feel it now we feel it as well for other reasons, right? It seems like the will is shifting. And yet, when we think about it from the perspective of the workforce, which is something you imagined,
Yes.
we're in the middle of a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're in that crisis, in our opinion, because we think that low compensation over hundreds of years, historical marginalization of our workforce are drivers of this shortage, and that specifically stems from historical racial and gender inequities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, at Friend Center, we have salaries that are 52% above the national industry, which is not the national norm is 29,000. So let's keep it all in perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. I mean, we're paying women to live in poverty at sort of
Right.
the national level.
Mm-hmm.
But we do other things like mentoring and professional development, tuition reimbursement. We have an emergency financial hardship and grant program for our teachers at Friend Center. We have an emotional hardship program, which reminds me of the pilot program that you've created in New Haven, the community, the crisis response team.
Yes, yes.
So we see the value of mental health, and we have tuition reductions for children for our employees who have children at Friend Center. And most recently in January, we launched the Friend Center Teacher Housing Initiative, where we provide free housing for teachers as a measure to offset our limited ability to raise salaries. Because if we raise salaries, we raise the burden on families, because the money, the federal and state dollars that come in don't come in at the full cost of care, right? So we have this conundrum situation. So we say the moment is now. We have a workforce in crisis. We have more demand for childcare than we've ever had. We have parents who need it, or our society needs it. And so we have a disconnect between our supply and demand chain. So what do you think is needed to address this workforce crisis?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, when I think about it, it's just not one piece.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole focus on what the struggle of working families, which is, yes, it's childcare, it's healthcare, it's wages, it's jobs. I might add that that over 2 million, about 2.3 million women left the workforce,
Yes.
primarily because there isn't childcare. Now that's detrimental to the economy, as well as devastating, for families. So when you think about this, we're talking about wages and jobs, and we're also talking about paying people more than a living wage. For the work that you're doing with childcare, with early childhood education. But we're also talking about a pay equity, men and women in the same jobs deserving the same pay. We're also talking about paid family and medical leave and paid sick days. These are all pieces of, if you will, a new social safety net, which is what we are trying to create for people. We had the wisdom, and it was Democrats and Republicans who crafted a social safety net all those years ago, because they understood the challenges that families were facing. But we haven't really recognized in many ways the changed nature of the family or the work-life situation. And now we're crafting the public policy initiatives that would address that. And that's why I think the whole, at this juncture, women are not opting out of the workforce, they're being pushed out of a workforce.
Right.
So how do we create the certainty of the job and the wages, a strong childcare industry? I view it as an industry, like an airline industry.
It is.
We bailed out
Absolutely.
the airline industry.
Absolutely.
What are we doing in terms of education and early childhood education? The housing piece that you mentioned, and people who have been struggling with evictions, et cetera. So that paid family and medical leave says that if your kid is sick, or you're sick, or an elderly parent is in trouble, a family can spend time, but you have to pay your bills. So therefore, paid family and medical leave says that you can care for your family if you have to. That's one of the struggles that families have with kids, that they can't take time off, or they lose their job.
Yeah.
So there are pillars here which are all in the public eye at the moment. And that's what we have to be pushing for, which is it's infrastructure. It's not roads and bridges, but
Right.
it's a family infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And all of those pieces are critical. And now is the moment. It's not just throwing money at a problem, Alex, or Dr. Yarbrough. It is about building that architecture for the future.
Yes.
Is how do we put in place systems that are there, which are going to last in the same way that Social Security, that Medicare, that these other systems that were put into place in order to cope with what the circumstances were at the time.
Yes, agreed. I would be remiss not to advocate for when we're talking about those systems, thinking about the way that the government funds early care and education spots so that providers can then increase wages for them.
That's
so
right.
I'm just going to put that out there as a
I might add that in the reconciliation bill, this is in the Build Back Better Act. This is 450. This is in the package. We're not negotiating. This is important for you to know.
Yeah.
$450 billion in lowering the cost of childcare and securing universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds.
Yep.
It's it addresses everything you're saying: high cost of childcare, lack of affordable childcare, workers forced to stay at home, employers having trouble filling jobs. It says, how do we expand the availability? How do we raise wages for the workers, et cetera? So you need to know that, and I might add, it also says that the vast majority of families would not pay more than 7% of their income on child care. And that the providers, as you just pointed out, would have resources to raise wages for their workers and expand the supply. So it is prescient. And that's why this has to happen. And that's why we need to fight against the naysayers. And there are naysayers. Yeah. People who, look, I'm for $3.5 trillion in this package going forward. And a package that we're looking primarily mostly paying for through taxes on the wealthiest individuals in this country and the corporations who have not been paying their fair share of taxes. We can do this. Yep. We can do it, but we need we need just the external pressure on the system that says this has got to happen. Yep. And if you don't make it happen, you pay a price. You pay a price.
Yep. I want to follow up. There are 3 questions that specifically touch on what the conversation is. One is related to universal pre-K. So an early childhood educator and administrator has posed the question, Amy Boris, that we are in the midst of a staffing crisis that could lead to a childcare desert. And universal pre-K will help 3- to 4-year-olds, but must also include the children younger than age 3. So what are your thoughts? Amy recognizes that change often happens slowly, but we don't have the luxury of change. And then the other question I want to add to that is, didn't have a third one, but I'll hold it. Just for Nitsa Diaz, how can we have a preschool program for parents who are over income for daycare and preschool and still can't afford the $300 per week? Where can we refer those families?
Right. Well, look, what needs to be done is, if we can, get legislation passed, then we can calibrate and take into consideration the nuances that you speak about.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're fighting to get, a universal pre-K, that we can do that. Okay, so we have that. And what is important, because your comments and the comments of of the audience are very important, because at the moment we do not have a universal pre-K system set up. It's not. We can't just say tomorrow, okay. Quite frankly, we do have a child tax credit system set up so that we are doing monthly basis, but so that then we can begin to look at the formulation of what does that mean? What are the nuances? What do you do about that over income for their, and what how can you adjust to make sure that families are taken care of? Because it is, again, it's middle-class families, it's working families, it's vulnerable families. And that's why we need to craft that universal pre-K so it is equitable in that sense, and it's universal, and people are not left out who are struggling. There are those at the very top, they can afford whatever it is that they need to afford. And they have been the beneficiary of tax cuts, et cetera. And, we don't have to worry there, but we do have to look at families. Sometimes both are working. They may be over income in some ways, but they still can't afford it.
They can't afford it. Right,
They
right.
can't.
They
And
can't.
that's where, so I would just say is that let's get this across the finish line. And then we want all the input we need to make sure that we are accommodating the most of the people in this country who need it.
So Rosa, as you're, sorry, Orlando. So as you're thinking about universal pre-K, and I'm conscious of our time and want to be respectful of your time. As you're thinking about universal pre-K, one of the things that could happen is if there are new dollars that are committed for universal pre-K,
right,
and the existing dollars then that are there sort of move down then into the 0 to 3 range, to support the sort of patchwork that we have now.
right.
What can't happen, and I think really I would love to ask for your consideration along this as you're talking to the phone bank that you mentioned,
Right.
is if you just create universal pre-K and don't add new dollars, we're stealing from ourselves.
Right. I got it. And Commissioner Byes mentioned that to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I will also say, let's the reconciliation bill. I hate that word, but the new bill that's just being discussed, that is new money, if you will.
Yeah.
Focus our attention on the appropriations process.
Yeah.
Okay, that is another distinct pot of money.
Absolutely.
And that where we're dealing with 0 to 3.
Yeah.
And a big focus on that. And, worked with Myra and others, to deal and the focus on 0 to 3. And we are there. And that is another resource in order to, look, this new package is will be hopefully for, what dollars they put in are for 10 years.
Yeah.
But we want to deal with what is sustainable every year. And the appropriations bills occur every single year. And I need to get people focused on that to be the advocates for increasing those dollars in terms of 0 to 3, where we have a very clear focus.
All right, so as we wrap up our time, I want to do like a pretend, right? So
Mhm.
let's pretend that you are a committed child and family activist. I think as we talked about before, let's pretend you're the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and let's pretend that you have the ear of the president. Does all those seem like realistic pretends we can do?
Those are realistic pretend.
Okay, I appreciate, great. So I'm thinking along those lines of creative solutions and things that we've been talking about. And with all those things being true, what would be your ideal solution for the early care and education industry? And what do you need from us to navigate towards that solution together?
Well, whatever, the solution is, I need the strong advocacy, the vocal advocacy, the persistent advocacy.
Okay.
And that is nationwide, Alex,
Yep.
because it's not, where I am, where our Connecticut people are, but it's folks all over the country that have to be speaking out and getting to their members of Congress in the House and in the Senate. Look, I think when years ago, I was fighting individually for equal pay for equal work.
Yep.
We fought for paid family and medical leave. We fought for paid sick days, but all in their own silos. And I found we kept beating our heads against the wall here, and with childcare as well. That was a pillar here. But then I don't know. I just said one point. I gathered all of the advocacy groups. This was about a women's economic agenda, because women, they are the most economically insecure demographic in the country. And these were the kinds of things that could help them. But we were dealing with them, if you will, one at a time.
Yeah.
And we were not getting the traction needed. So we said together, and I met with the various groups, let's create an agenda, a women and families economic agenda. And these pieces are all of the pillars: paid family and medical leave, paid sick days, child care, equal pay for equal work. I added, because I come from dealing with the tax credit piece of this. I view the solution as our bringing these pieces together.
Yeah.
This is a whole.
Right.
As I said before, there's not one piece that you have to have all the other pieces in place. And it's the jobs piece, it's the increased wages, it's all of that is going to build that architecture for the future in this area. I go back to a word that it's human infrastructure, if you will, family infrastructure, whatever we want to just call it, a care economy. That has got to be parallel to what we are doing to make sure we're building roads and bridges and creating jobs.
Yep.
Because if we create jobs without any of these other people, these other pieces, people are not going to survive. But that is the case that as a chair of the Appropriations Committee, as an activist for children and for families, and as someone that at least I can get to the president and speak to him about this, is what I am trying to do as we move forward.
Well, I'm behind you.
I know that. I know that.
And I'm sure there are many people in our field and on this call that are as well. So let us know how we can help shape and apply pressure, right?
We're here.
As needed.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do. You change people's lives, and there isn't anything that's more noble than doing that. And you give people a better chance at a better life. That is what this is all about. So thank you so much to friends and to you, Dr. Yarbrough, and to, all who are out there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me here this morning.
Thank you for this conversation today. There are numerous questions that have come in through our Q&A, a high interest on advocacy on the local and community level, what can be done. Thank you, everyone who have provided questions. I will make sure that both Rosa and Alex receive these questions and have them. Here's how you can help. Be in partnership with early care and education providers. Donate your brain power to organizations that focus on young children. Where do you see the opportunity? Lean in there. Talk about or invite early care and education leaders to talk about the issues to your friends, your partners, your neighbors, your employers. Help us to get the decision makers to reshape thinking around the ways that communities prioritize early care and education. Put children at the center, not just your own children or my own children who may be the center of our lives, but put all children. Drive conversations in spaces that often ignore high quality early childhood education, economic development, business development, high school truancy, gun violence, really all conversations, and put children and childcare at the center of that. I want to express my gratitude to thank you, Rosa, to thank you, Alex, to thank you, participants. Thank you to the Friends Center for Children, family, and teams. We really appreciate you joining us here today, and we look forward to future conversations. Rosa, go. Thank you for your work. Keep doing it. We celebrate you. We cheer on what you are doing, and we are most appreciative that New Haven has a voice and Connecticut has a voice in our highest places of decision making. So thank you so very much.
Can I add one more thing to what
Please.
people can do? If you do know folks who you believe are eligible for the child tax credit, but they do not file their taxes, please get to them. We can provide you with all of the information that you need to let them know that they are eligible, that they are protected, and they needn't be afraid to apply because that's what this program is there. That is an enormous help, and we can get you that information. Thanks for all that you do. And really, I'm so grateful to be able to be in this position, but to represent all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.
You too.